In this video, we will take a look at the cities in the world that have recorded the highest murder rates from 1980 until recently in a bar chart race. Now before we get started, I should just mention the data for this bar chart race was obtained through several sources. Not all the sources use the exact same methodology, so take these results with a slight grain of salt. They're not perfect. Keep in mind also that these statistics do not represent deaths of civilians or soldiers within war zones, as that would be an entirely different list. The numbers on this data represent homicides per 100,000 people. Okay, so before we begin the actual bar chart race, let's just look at the 1980 data. When you first see the data, you will notice that most cities on this list are from Brazil, though the number 1 and 4 are from Colombia. However, pay close attention to the specific numbers on the chart. You will notice that in 1980, the range in the top 10 is from 15 for the number 10 city to 43 homicides per 100,000 people for the number 1 city. But this range will be drastically different some years later. You can also notice at the very beginning of the chart here and through the early 1980s, a number of the cities in Brazil and a couple in Colombia make up the list. Medellin in particular stands out as a particularly dangerous city at this time, ranked first on this list. This was the birthplace of Pablo Escobar, and these numbers largely reflect some of the dangers of his cartel, which was established in the late 1970s. Many Brazilian cities will also remain on this list for quite some time, and according to researchers, this is largely due to extreme poverty, income inequality, combined with easy access to guns and high levels of drug use. Okay, so this is where we start. Now let's begin the bar chart race. As it begins, you can see Rio de Janeiro start to climb the chart here. This is perhaps where the poverty, income inequality, gun access, and drug use in Brazil could be seen the worst during these years. Here in 1984, we see Kingston, Jamaica enter the list as the only non-Brazil or Colombia nation on the list up till now. 1985, Medellin drops out for a moment, but that's just a statistical limitation rather than any reality. In the late 1980s, the US cities of Miami, New Orleans, and New York all make brief showings. This is mostly due to the crack cocaine wars. As we enter the 1990s, you start to see a lot more of the Colombian cities on the list. Brazil's continue to remain at a high rate, but the Colombian cities jump up significantly. However, and let's pause here for a moment, you'll notice that by this time here in the early 1990s, there's a significant difference in the range. Whereas when we started, the number 10 city had 15 murders per 100,000 people and the number 1 had 43. Here by 1992, you can see that the 10th ranked city has as many as the first ranked city did a decade earlier. As we enter 1994, you can see Cape Town entering the list. It's now only the 5th country to be represented on this list. Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica, the US, and now South Africa. Those will continue to jump around the list as well. Here around 1998, we start to see the deadly fruits of the continued growth of the Colombian cartels. At this point, they controlled 80% of the world's cocaine supplies. Medellin no longer stands out by itself, but lots of Colombian cities have entered the list. Through the early 2000s, the list continues to be dominated by Colombian cities, Kingston, Cape Town, and a couple of Brazilian cities as well, Durban, South Africa. Around 2003-2004, the Colombian cartels began to fade slightly, but they did continue to remain active. Some of the Colombian cities became slightly less dangerous, and Brazil's homicide rate continued to climb steeply. Now in 2008 and especially 2009, Honduras fell into a terrible condition. And now around 2010, let's pause here for a moment, you will see a massive change on the bar chart here. Part of this is due to the changing global dynamics, but part of it is due to more accurate sources of information. Here you can see a number of countries on the list, still Colombia, Honduras, and Brazil, but also El Salvador, Mexico, Venezuela starts to make the list. The social conditions in all of these places share many similarities. There's social inequality, armed conflicts, poverty, unemployment, gun access, drug use, organized crime, ineffective police, and a number of places where the political situation has failed. So though there are a lot of countries represented right now on this list, it's all for quite similar reasons. The specific cities jump around a bit, but here in 2012, Honduras does stand out as a particularly difficult place during these years. Around 2013, the political instability of Venezuela led Caracas to become increasingly violent. Now, we just saw a big jump from 2014 up till 2019. Now, there's actually some gaps in the statistics that I could find, so ignore that, but there is a reason why the numbers look a bit different here in 2019 than they did in 2014. By 2019, the violence that had been happening in quite a few of those locations in South America and Latin America had migrated up towards Mexico. The violence and instability in a number of nations were causing people to flee, looking for a safe harbor. Many came to Mexico. Combine that with the already ongoing drug wars in Mexico that had been leading to higher levels of violence over the past 10 years or so, and it became a recipe for terrible violence. So as of 2019, Tijuana and Juarez, both US border cities, are number 1 and 2 on the list. Caracas and Cape Town continue to remain on this list. On the positive side, though, it should be mentioned that these numbers are overall lower than they were in the early part of the decade. For example, in 2011, the 10th ranked city had 101 murders per 100,000 people, whereas in 2019 here, previously 10th ranked city would be number 3 on this list. So overall, actually, there is significantly less violence in 2019 as there was in 2011. It's just migrated. You'll also notice St. Louis and Baltimore made the list for the first time. St. Louis's murder numbers have increased significantly over the past few years. St. Louis is currently considered by many to be the most dangerous city in the US, which has been causing its population to decrease as people leave the city, which in turn makes its murders per 100,000 people continue to look even worse. Higher number of murders, lower overall population. Baltimore also is notoriously high in murder rates and has been for a long time, but the statistics since 2015 have been worse than before. Now, I stopped this list in 2019. So 2020 is not on this graph, but the numbers in 2020 look like they're a bit all over the place. If this video here gets enough interest, I will make another one about 2020 specifically, because due to everything that surrounded the global pandemic, the violent crime rates shot up significantly in a number of places, especially those where there are high levels of social inequality and poverty. Please come back to this channel for lots of interesting information about different cities around the US and elsewhere.